4 a.m. Darkness still rules the Tanzanian savannah. A man wakes without an alarm or a watch. His body just knows. 10,000 years ago, his ancestors woke at the same time and place. Driven by the exact same purpose: survival.
While you are here, the Hadzabe prepare bows of colossal strength.
140 kilos of tension. 70% of an adult's weight.
All to hunt baboons on the rocks before dawn.
Before the sun rises over the waters of Lake Eyasi.
If you are passionate about wild animals and real documentaries, do not leave this video. Watch until the end, subscribe to the channel now, and comment where you are watching from. The temperature has not yet passed 16 degrees Celsius. The air carries the particular smell of the savanna before dawn, a mixture of dry earth, acacias, and the trail of animals that move during the night. The hunter wears a baboon skin over his shoulders, not for decorative tradition, but for pure functionality. The dark fur helps camouflage his silhouette against the rocks where the primates sleep. Every detail of what he wears has been tested by countless generations before him. The Hadzabe are 1,300 people. This number represents the totality of one of the last genuine hunter-gatherer civilizations on the planet. Of these 1,300, only 300 to 350 still live exclusively from what the land offers, without supplementing their diet with bought or cultivated foods. The rest inhabit an intermediate zone between two worlds. Some work as safari guides, others trade meat and honey for clothes and tools with neighboring tribes, and a growing number live near villages where they can access schools and health posts. The man who woke up at 4 in the morning belongs to the smaller group. He never attended a school. He does not know how to read. He does not know his own birth year, because his people do not count time in that way. What he knows how to do could fill entire libraries if someone managed to translate that knowledge into written words. He knows how to identify more than 300 species of edible plants by smell, by the texture of the leaves, by the color of the bark. He knows how to track a wounded animal for kilometers through signs that most people would not even notice. A leaf folded in a specific way, an almost invisible mark in the dust, the flight pattern of scavenger birds on the horizon. He knows how to craft a bow from scratch using only materials found in nature, and this bow will have a draw weight comparable to modern sports equipment, costing hundreds of dollars. The making of the bow begins with the selection of the right wood. The Hadzabe use branches from specific trees of the region, chosen for weight, flexibility, and the absence of knots that could create points of weakness. The branch is heated over the fire and bent using the fork of another tree as a mold. The process can take hours or days, depending on the humidity of the wood and the weather conditions. The string was traditionally made from animal tendons, but today many hunters use nylon threads obtained through trade with other tribes. This pragmatic adaptation illustrates something fundamental about the Hadzabe. They are not a people frozen in time, but a living culture that absorbs what works and discards what does not serve. The arrows require even more precision. There are 3 main types, each designed for a specific function. The sharpened wooden-tipped arrows are used for birds and small mammals, squirrels, mongooses, hares. The arrows with metal tips, obtained through trade with the Datoga, a neighboring tribe of blacksmiths, are reserved for medium prey like baboons and dik-dik antelopes, and the poisoned arrows are kept for the larger animals, impalas, warthogs, giraffes. The poison deserves special attention. The Hadzabe extract toxins from 2 main plants, the desert rose, known locally as panjuko, and a vine called shanjo. The preparation process is meticulous. The sap is collected, boiled until it forms a dark and sticky paste, and then applied to the arrow shaft just below the metal tip. The precise amount matters. Too much poison can contaminate the animal's meat and make it unfit for consumption. Too little poison might not be enough to bring down the prey. The time the poison takes to take effect varies according to the size of the animal. A 45-kilo impala may succumb in 30 minutes. A giraffe may take 6 hours. During this time, the hunter must track the wounded animal, following the increasingly erratic signs of a being that is losing control of its own body. The Hadzabe describe the trail of a poisoned animal as drunk. The steps become irregular. The direction changes without apparent logic, until finally the animal stops. But on this specific morning, the target is baboons. And the hunting of baboons requires a completely different strategy. Baboons are social and extremely vigilant animals. They sleep in groups on rocky slopes, positioned in difficult-to-access places that offer protection against terrestrial predators. They have sentries that alternate shifts during the night. At the slightest sign of danger, they emit alarm screams that wake the whole troop in seconds. Hunting baboons during the day is practically impossible. Their vision is as good as a human's, and the numerical advantage is always on their side. The Hadzabe solution is to attack in the darkness that precedes dawn, preferably during the new moon, when the lack of natural lighting works in the hunter's favor. A group of 4 to 6 men surrounds the rock formation where the baboons are sleeping. They move in absolute silence through treacherous terrain, loose stones, thorny bushes, steep slopes. A single broken branch can alert the sentries and ruin hours of preparation. When the encirclement is complete, the hunters makes a purposeful noise. The baboons wake up in panic. Instinct commands them to run downwards, towards the dense vegetation where they can hide. But to get there, they must pass the hunters positioned strategically on the slope. In the confusion of the abrupt awakening, in the almost total darkness, the Hadzabe have a window of seconds to loose their arrows against targets moving at maximum speed. The success rate varies enormously. Some mornings, the group returns with 2 or 3 baboons. Other mornings, they return empty-handed, having spent hours of effort and lost arrows that got stuck in trees or fell into inaccessible crevices. The recovery of lost arrows is a constant activity. The Hadzabe spend considerable time throwing stones and sticks at branches to dislodge projectiles that missed the target. Arrows are too valuable to be abandoned. The physical cost of these expeditions is real and visible. The bodies of Hadzabe hunters carry the marks of a lifetime facing the savannah. Scars from thorns that pierced the skin during nocturnal chases. Marks from scorpion stings found under rocks. Scratches from the claws of baboons that defended themselves before succumbing. Occasionally, more serious injuries, falls from trees during honey. Collection, bites from venomous snakes, encounters with leopards that also hunt in the darkness before dawn. Hadzabe medicine is limited by what nature offers. Certain plants have antibiotic properties recognized by modern science. Others function as natural analgesics. But for serious injuries, the only option is to endure and wait for the body to heal itself. Infant mortality is still high compared to modern standards, although it has decreased with occasional access to health posts in the vicinity. Adults who survive childhood tend to remain healthy until advanced ages, 60, 70 years, with surprisingly low rates of cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and other conditions associated with the Western lifestyle. Baboon meat is considered a delicacy. The Hadzabe describe it as their favorite food among game meats. An adult baboon can weigh between 15 and 30 kilos, providing enough protein to feed an entire camp for 1 or 2 days. Nothing is wasted. The meat is consumed. The skin is used as clothing or to make bags. The larger bones are broken to extract the marrow. The edible viscera are divided among the hunters. But hunting represents only a fraction of the Hadzabe diet. The most recent anthropological studies indicate that approximately 60 to 70% of the calories consumed by the tribe come from plant sources collected by the women: tubers, fruits, berries, seeds. Meat, despite being culturally valued and nutritionally important, is an irregular supplement that depends on luck, skill, and weather conditions. The sun begins to rise on the horizon as the hunters return to camp. The sky turns from absolute black to shades of purple, orange, and pink that reflect in the brackish waters of Lake Ayasi in the distance. The camp consists of 5 or 6 circular shelters, built with branches and bushes, structures that can be assembled in less than an hour and abandoned without remorse when it is time to move on. The Hadzabe move on average 6 times a year, following the availability of resources and avoiding the depletion of any specific area. The women are already awake. Some are breastfeeding babies. Others prepare the tools for the day's gathering, digging sticks to unearth tubers, baskets to transport fruit, improvised containers to carry water. Small children play on the periphery of the camp, supervised by a diffuse network of adults and adolescents. The responsibility for childcare is shared so naturally that it would be impossible to identify a primary caregiver for any specific child. The concept of private property practically does not exist among the Hadzabe. A camp of 30 people might share a single axe. The pots, when they exist, are used by whoever needs them. Even the bows, which are the most personal objects a man owns, can be borrowed without ceremony. The only partial exception is the arrows, especially the poisoned ones, which carry a significant investment of time and knowledge. This absence of accumulation is not poverty in the sense we know. It is an adaptive choice refined over millennia. When your way of life requires constant mobility, every object becomes a weight to be carried. The Hadzabe optimized existence for the minimum necessary and discovered that the minimum necessary is surprisingly little. The language they use to communicate this existence is as unique as their way of life. Hadzane is an isolate language. It has no proven relationship with any other known language on the planet. It contains 3 types of click consonants: dental, alveopalatal, and lateral. These sounds, produced by the suction of air against different parts of the mouth, carry specific meanings that foreigners take years to master. For a long time, linguists classified Hadzane, together with the Khoisan languages of southern Africa, because of the shared clicks. More recent genetic and linguistic research has demonstrated that the resemblance is superficial. The Hadzabe developed the clicks independently, over a separate history that may be tens of thousands of years old. Most Hadzabe also speak Swahili as a second language, which allows communication with neighboring tribes and with the tourists and researchers who occasionally visit the region. But Hadzane remains the language of daily life, of intimacy, of knowledge transmitted from generation to generation. Children learn the ancestral language first, before any contact with Swahili. Fluency in I. Hadzane is considered the most important marker of identity. More than blood or place of birth, it is the language that defines who is truly Hadzabe. If the hunting of baboons demonstrates the skill of the Hadzabe as predators, the gathering of honey reveals something even more extraordinary: their capacity to form alliances with other species. The honey guide is a discreet bird, approximately the size of a thrush, with black and white plumage that draws no special attention. But this animal possesses a unique characteristic in the animal kingdom. It actively guides human beings to wild beehives in exchange for a reward. The interaction works like this. When a Hadzabe hunter wants to find honey, he emits a series of specific whistles and strikes tree trunks with a particular rhythm. These sounds were developed and refined over generations, transmitted from fathers to sons like any other survival skill. The honey guides of the region learn to recognize these calls as an invitation for cooperation. If a bird is nearby and knows the location of a hive, it responds with a characteristic call, different from its normal vocalizations, and begins to fly in a specific direction, stopping periodically to check if the human is following. The Hadzabe follows. The bird advances another stretch, the Hadzabe follows again. This process can continue for hundreds of meters or even kilometers through dense and irregular terrain, until finally the guide stops near a tree that contains a hive. Researchers from the University of Cambridge documented this interaction with scientific rigor. The data is impressive. When the Hadzabe use the call system to attract honey guides, their success rate in finding hives increases by 560%. Furthermore, the hives found with the help of the birds tend to be significantly larger and more productive than those discovered without this assistance. It is estimated that between 8 and 10% of the entire Hadzabe diet is obtained with the direct help of the guides. What makes this partnership even more remarkable is that it seems to have developed independently in different regions of Africa. In Mozambique, the Yao people use a completely different call system, a sequence of guttural sounds instead of whistles. And here is the fascinating detail. When researchers played recordings of the Yao calls to guides in Tanzania, the birds responded much less frequently. The local guides had learned the specific dialects of the humans with whom they interact regularly. This means we are facing a form of interspecific communication that was culturally transmitted on both sides. Both the humans and the birds learned from their respective social groups how to communicate with each other. It is the type of relationship that defies simple categories. It is not domestication. It is not parasitism. It is something closer to an unwritten contract, renewed with every successful interaction. The bird's reward is access to the wax and larvae of the hive, foods it could not obtain alone, as it has no way to face the defending bees. The human's reward is a concentrated source of calories in the form of pure honey. But getting to the honey is not simple. African bees build their hives preferentially inside baobab trees, frequently at heights of 10 to 15 meters from the ground. The baobab is a peculiar tree. Its massive trunk can reach diameters of 8 to 9 meters, and the internal wood is often hollow or spongy, creating ideal cavities for bee colonies. The Hadzabe hunter who locates a hive must first evaluate if it is worth the effort. Very small hives do not justify the risk of the climb very aggressively. Defended hives can result in hundreds of stings. The decision is made based on careful observation, the quantity of bees entering and leaving, the probable size of the colony, the accessibility of the location. If the decision is to proceed, the climbing process begins. The Hadzabe use axes to craft wooden stakes on the spot, hammering them one by one into the trunk of the baobab as they ascend. Each stake serves as a foothold, while the next is positioned higher up. It is intense physical work performed in a vertical position, frequently under a scorching sun, with bees already starting to investigate the intruder. When the hunter reaches the height of the hive, he lights a torch of dry grass and uses the smoke to stun the bees. The smoke has a curious effect on these insects. Instead of fleeing, they begin to consume honey frantically, apparently preparing to abandon the hive in case of fire. This behavior makes them lethargic and less prone to sting. With the bees temporarily neutralized, the hunter reaches inside the cavity and begins to remove honeycombs. The product is a substance completely different from the industrialized honey we know. It is dense, dark in some, varieties almost white in others, with textures that vary from liquid to crystallized. It contains not only honey but also pollen, propolis, larvae and wax, a complete nutritional package that provides sugars, proteins, fats and micronutrients in a single source. The Hadzabe recognize and name 7 different types of honey, each produced by distinct species of bees and with its own characteristics of flavor, texture and properties. The honey of stingless bees is particularly valued for its milder flavor and the absence of risk during collection. But the most productive hives belong to Apis mellifera, the common African bee whose stings are painful and potentially dangerous in large quantities. During the wet season, when flowers are in abundance and hives at the peak of production, honey can represent 15 to 20% of all calories consumed by the Hadzabe, a proportion greater even than game meat. Men and women rank honey consistently as their favorite food above any meat or fruit. And here arises an interesting contradiction about the relationship with the honey guides. The romantic narrative suggests that the Hadzabe pay the birds by generously leaving a portion of wax and larvae as thanks. The reality observed by researchers is more complex. Many hunters deliberately hide, bury or burn the remains of the hive after extracting the honey. The logic is to keep the bird hungry, ensuring that it remains motivated to guide humans in the future. This calculated manipulation does not diminish the sophistication of the relationship. On the contrary, it demonstrates that the Hadzabe understand the dynamic of incentives involved and exploit it strategically. It is the type of social intelligence applied to the natural world that allowed the survival of this people for millennia. The return to camp with honey is always a cause for celebration. Unlike meat, which, Needs to be consumed quickly before it spoils. Honey can last for days or even weeks if stored properly. It is shared freely among all members of the group, without distinction of who participated or not in the collection. Small children receive generous portions. Visitors from other camps are included without hesitation. This generosity happens in a context of increasing territorial pressure. In the last century, the Hadzabe lost approximately 90% of their ancestral lands. Pastoralist tribes like the Datoga and the Maasai expanded their herds into areas traditionally used by the hunter-gatherers. Farmers converted savanna into fields of corn and sorghum. Private game reserves fenced off territories that were previously free for anyone to traverse. The Tanzanian government tried on several occasions, in 1939, in 1965, and again in the following decades, to civilize the Hadzabe through forced settlement programs. All attempts failed. The Hadzabe simply abandoned the villages built for them and returned to the savannah. In 2011, a legal victory recognized the right of the Hadzabe over 57,000 acres of land, a fraction of what they once possessed, but a minimally viable territorial base. In 2024, another 30 square kilometers were returned to community administration. These conquests represent hope, but the pressure continues. Each year brings new invasions on the borders of the territory, new conflicts with herders whose animals compete with the wildlife, new temptations for young Hadzabe to abandon the traditional life in search of jobs in the growing cities of Tanzania. Meanwhile, the women of the camp conduct their own form of gathering, no less important for the survival of the group. Armed with digging sticks, long branches with tips hardened in the fire, they scour the savannah in search of buried tubers. The knowledge required for this task is immense. Dozens of species of plants produce edible roots in the region, but many others are toxic or simply not nutritious. Identifying the right plant from withered leaves or dry stems, locating where the root likely is, and digging at the exact point requires years of learning. Tubers are not the tastiest food. The Hadzabe themselves describe them as a backup option, consumed when fruits and honey are scarce. But they are fundamental to the food security of the group. Unlike game animals, which can be unpredictable, and fruits which depend on specific seasons, tubers are available all year round. In times of scarcity, they are the difference between starving and surviving. The fruit of the baobab occupies a special place in the Hadzabe diet and culture. The dry pulp of this fruit contains 6 times more vitamin C than an orange and significant amounts of prebiotic fibers. Studies on the intestinal microbiome of the Hadzabe revealed a bacterial diversity far superior to that found in industrialized populations, and the baobab fruit seems to be one of the factors responsible for this microbial richness. Dusk brings a change in the rhythm of the camp. The heat of the day begins to subside. The children who spent hours playing and exploring return to be near the adults. The hunters who went out at dawn have already rested and eaten. The women have returned with their gatherings. It is the moment when the community gathers more intentionally. The Hadzabe have no organized religion in the sense we know. There are no temples, priests, sacred texts, or mandatory rituals, but there is something that approaches a spiritual practice, the ipim. The word has no direct translation. It refers simultaneously to a type of dance, to certain cuts of meat reserved for initiated men, and to a code of conduct that governs aspects of social life. The ipim dance happens at nightfall, when men and women form separate groups and execute rhythmic movements accompanied by chants. There are no instruments other than clapping hands and feet stomping on the ground. The chants are partially improvised, partially traditional. The effect for one who observes is hypnotic, a collective expression of something that transcends words. It is difficult to explain the purpose of epemi in functional terms. It does not produce food. It does not build shelters. It does not resolve conflicts directly. But anthropologists who lived for a long time with the Hadzabe report that the practice seems to serve as a kind of social reset, a moment when accumulated tensions dissipate, when the collective identity is reaffirmed, when each individual reconnects with something greater than themselves. The night advances. The fire in the center of the camp is the only source of light. Conversations gradually diminish. Children fall asleep in the laps of adults and are carried to the shelters. Couples retire. The elders sometimes remain awake longer, looking at the fire or the stars. There is no insomnia among the Hadzabe. Studies on sleep patterns in hunter-gatherer populations revealed that they sleep approximately the same number of hours as people in industrialized societies, between 6 and 8 hours per night. The difference lies in the quality. Without artificial light, without electronic stimuli, without the abstract worries that keep so many of us awake, sleep comes naturally when darkness arrives. And in a few hours, the cycle begins again. 4 in the morning. The body simply knows. The Hadzabe look at us and see lost people. It is not arrogance, it is perspective. For them, a society that needs apps to remember to drink water, that pays gyms, to simulate movements that should be natural, that stores food until it spoils while others starve, is a society that has lost something fundamental. They have never known collective hunger. In 1,300 members distributed in bands of 20 to 30 people, no one accumulates more than they can carry. No one sleeps alone by choice. No one eats while the neighbor goes in need. There is a word in Hadzane that has no direct translation into any modern language. Epimei. It is at the same time a dance, a ritual, a code of conduct, and a way of seeing the world. When the Hadzabe elders perform the Epimei at dusk, they are doing something that no technology has managed to replace, reconnecting the group with something greater than each individual. Perhaps this is what we seek in our therapies, spiritual retreats, and meditation apps. They found it 10,000 years ago, and they continue finding it every night, under the same stars that their ancestors observed, on the same ground that countless generations walked before them. The question is not whether the Hadzabe will survive. The question is, what happens to humanity when the last civilization that knows how to live without destroying disappears completely?